Hello, this is the Disaster Recovery Pro, and this is my video series discussing key topics in information technology with a focus on disaster recovery and business continuity. In today's presentation, we're going to talk about the difference between two key concepts, recoverability and resiliency. These are two terms that I've thrown around a lot, and I wanted to make sure that you understood the difference between them and understand that in different contexts, you're going to want to focus on one or the other as a priority. And most importantly, understand why you need to consider both concepts when planning your recovery program. When we talk about recovery, we assume that there is a disruption that is going to interrupt normal operations and bring them to a halt. In response to this disruption, we'll go through a period of time where we'll be in recovery, where we're executing our recovery plan to restore normal operations. And after that, we resume operations in our recovery mode. Basically, recovery is a planned response or reaction to an interruption to operations. Again, the obvious assumption here is that a disruptive event is going to happen that's going to stop your normal operations, and you can't defend against it, so you're going to have to enact your reactive recovery plan. When you resume operations, depending on your recovery plan, you may be resuming operations at full capacity. You may be resuming operations at some sort of limited capacity, depending on how extensive your plan is. But again, the key assumption here is that there will be a disruption and you have to execute a planned reaction to it. With the right kind of technology solution in place, it's entirely possible to achieve really short recovery time, something more like a failover than a lengthy recovery period. This kind of stance is what I like to call fast recovery or near resilient. This is still a case where we assume a disruption will happen that will stop normal operations, and we still have a planned reaction or response. The difference here is that that response can be executed very quickly or even in an automated fashion that can really minimize the downtime to an inconvenience rather than a long interruption. Automation is highly desired here. That's going to be the key to getting that recovery time down to near zero and reduce the dependency on human interaction to execute the recovery steps. A well-automated solution of this type that's very mature can be close enough to true resilience for most purposes, but it's still a recovery since, again, it's a planned reaction to an event that actually does disrupt your operations, even if it's only for a very short time. When we talk about operational resiliency, this is where we really see a shift in the overall philosophy of how we're going to protect our business operations. With operational resiliency, instead of focusing on recovering from a disruption, we're focusing on being agile enough to dodge or be able to actively defend against a disruption in the first place and just continue normal operations without a hitch. A very straightforward and very relevant example of operational resiliency is many companies' response to the current pandemic situation. Workforces that were already prepared to work remotely without having to provision new equipment or change processes to do so came out rather well in the pandemic, while other companies had to scramble to provision additional firewalls and access points and even possibly go through things like issuing laptops and remote access tokens to their workforce. Already having these capabilities and being practiced at using them is a resilient stance, whereas needing to provision the technology and come up with the process and procedure to work remotely in response to the pandemic or any other event that impacts the ability to travel and gather in workplaces is very clearly a recovery stance versus a resilience stance. Another good example is a website that's built as a cloud application that crosses several regions and has been engineered to have redundant components in more than one cloud region so that if one region goes down, the other can pick up the load without any hitch. Operational resiliency can also take the form of strong cybersecurity measures, things that prevent things like distributed denial of service attacks or ransomware infections, or even things as basic as infrastructure redundancies, things like redundant network links that will pick up the load if one part of the link is cut or severed. These are all typical components of a resilient solution. Again, this is a stance where you've taken into consideration when designing your infrastructure, your applications, and your business processes how to defend against disruptions, as opposed to how to react to a disruption. When you consider recovery versus resilience, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that one is inherently better or more important than the other. In practice, most organizations will find that a hybrid approach is the best way to go about things. The idea is to combine the best aspects of each approach to optimize your ability to deal with disruptions. You use your strong active defensives to sidestep or withstand disruptions, and you'll have a recovery plan as a response when a disruption gets by your defenses. In most large organizations, cost is a big factor. It's usually far too expensive to protect your entire enterprise with your best recovery methods or best resilience plans. So you need to prioritize. You need to look at what are your highest priority business functions and defend them with your fastest response recovery methods or your best resilient defenses. And then for your lower priority functions or your test and development environments, you can use slower, more traditional recovery methods that are usually a lot less costly to put in place. So you'll want to adopt a resilient posture as much as possible to reduce your exposure to risk, but you still want to be able to respond to disruptions and have your highest priority, most critical business functions that typically bring in the most revenue to be protected with the fastest and more expensive recovery methods, while your lower priority applications and processes are protected by less expensive, probably slower recovery methods, so that you're focusing the majority of your recovery spend on your applications and business processes that can tolerate the least downtime and not spending as much money on applications and functions that can tolerate longer downtimes. Again, by combining the two approaches, resilience and recovery, you gain defense in depth. You're putting the most money and priority on the functions that are most important, and you have multiple layers of protection. You have active defenses to try and stop a disruption from happening in the first place, and you have a plan to react to those disruptions if it gets by your defenses. Thanks for watching today's presentation. If you found this topic interesting and you want to learn more about disaster recovery and business continuity, you can help support the channel by leaving a comment to tell me what you thought about it, clicking like on the video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you won't miss out on my next video. Your support and feedback is very important, so thank you for watching and supporting the channel, and have a great day.